All right, so you know how the internet kind of exploded after Abdizar's comments about business proposal, the ones where he said he didn't read the source material for the show? Well, lots of you reached out wanting to unpack that whole thing. And I get it. Like, why do some slip-ups just stick with us? Why can't we just forget them?
It's really interesting, actually. It all comes down to our brains and how we form memories.
Okay, so let's deep dive into the neuroscience of it all. Where do we even start?
Well, we've got to talk about the hippocampus. It's
Right.
basically the memory center of our brains. But here's the thing, it's not working solo. Right next to it, you've got the amygdala.
The amygdala is like, what, the feeling part of our brains?
Exactly, the emotional center. And the fact that these two are neighbors, super important.
So are you saying our memories are, directly tied to our emotions?
Totally. Imagine this. Something happens, and it triggers a strong emotion in you. Maybe disappointment, maybe anger, whatever it is. That emotion kind of supercharges the memory. It's like certain pathways in your brain, like the ones with adrenaline, light up and make sure that memory really sticks. Almost like a high-definition mental snapshot.
So, like, I might forget what I had for breakfast today, but Abdizar's comments, those are going to stay with me because of how strongly people felt about them, right?
Exactly. It's like, those moments you just can't shake. And it's not just random. There's this thing called negativity bias.
Oh, I've heard of that. It's like we're wired to focus on the bad stuff more than the good.
Right, exactly. It's like our brains are naturally more sensitive to negative information. Researchers have found that even if you're given a totally equal amount of positive and negative stuff, our brains tend to zero in on the negative.
Makes sense. It's like one bad online review totally outweighing tons of good ones.
Yeah.
That negativity bias in action, right?
Exactly. And in Abdizar's case, that comment was kind of like a huge red flag for our negativity biased brains. It's just what we're wired to pay attention to.
Okay, so we've got the strong emotional reaction, we've got the negativity bias, amplifying it all, and then spreading it like wildfire online, too. But here's what gets me. Do we actually remember things exactly how they happened? Isn't it true that our memories are kind of like reconstructions?
Oh, you're spot on there. It's not like we've got perfect recording devices in our heads. Every time we remember something, we're kind of piecing it together, like a puzzle, but the pieces can shift around a bit.
So you're saying that over time, our current mood, or even stuff we learn later, can actually change how we remember something that happened in the past.
Exactly. It's why two people who see the same thing can walk away with totally different memories of what went down. And it means someone might remember Abdizar's comment as being even harsher than it actually was, just because of how our memories work.
Wow, that's kind of trippy when you think about it. And what about the people who didn't even know Abdizar before this whole thing? Talk about a first impression.
First impressions, oh, they're powerful, especially when they're negative. That negativity bias kicks in again. We make these snap judgments based on limited info, and they can be so hard to change. It's like we assume that one instance is a perfect representation of who someone is.
So for someone who's never seen Abdizar's work before, this blunder could overshadow everything else he's done. All his talent, his accomplishments, just gone because of this one comment.
It's a real risk, unfortunately. Which brings us to the big question. How do you even start to change that perception, especially once it's out there?
Right. Like, how do you bounce back from a public blunder? Especially when everyone's talking about it.
That's where things get really tricky. But there are these concepts called assimilation and accommodation. Think of assimilation like this. You're taking new information and fitting it into your existing beliefs.
So, like, someone who already loves Abdizar, they might see this whole thing as a one-time slip-up. They're assimilating this new information into their already positive view of him.
Exactly. But accommodation, that's tougher. It means actually changing your existing beliefs to fit in this new information, even if it contradicts what you thought before.
So for those who've already decided Abdizar's, canceled, he needs to give them a reason to accommodate, to actually change their minds about him. But how?
It's a process, that's for sure. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's not about just erasing the memory of what happened. It's about showing genuine growth and change. Actions speak louder than words.
So he needs to, walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
Exactly. Let things cool down a bit and then come back with real, tangible efforts to learn and do better. That's how you start to shift people's perceptions.
This whole deep dive has been pretty mind-blowing. I think the biggest takeaway for me is just how complex our brains are. And understanding how they work, especially these biases we all have, can be so powerful.
Absolutely. It's a huge reminder to be more mindful, to be critical thinkers, and really evaluate information before we make up our minds about something,
Right.
especially when it comes to judging other people.
So much to think about. I'm going to leave you with this. Think about a time while you formed a strong opinion about someone based on, like, one thing you heard or saw. Now, knowing what we know about how memory works, how might you approach a situation like that differently in the future?